Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you could be here today, and I'm really looking forward to the talk with Tim Burkett. Tim is the former guiding teacher of the Minnesota Zen Meditation Center. He's retired now, but he is still actively involved with the Zen Center, mentoring and giving talks and doing all sorts of things there, I'm sure. And he's been stepping in and giving these talks once a month. And the talk series is on Chuangzu, and the series is called Way of the Butterfly. So I'm really excited for this. I think it's the fifth installment, and he's going to talk about humor. I think that is probably good for today. You guys have seen more about his bio in the emails, and I've said it in previous talks. So I think we can just jump to it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tim.
Thank you, Lily.
Thank you.
Great to see you guys. A few of you I see, and many names I see. Wonderful to have you here. So today, this is my fifth talk on the teachings of Chuangzi, the second of the great Taoist sages. And this one today, I'm going to talk about humor because he is full of humor and his teaching, and I'll talk about how it resonates within the development of Chan Zen in China in particular. And then next week, I'm talking next Sunday at the Zen Center, and I'm going to stay with humor, and then I'm going to talk about ways in which we can practice manifesting the good humor that Chuangzi is always sharing with us in difficult times like these. Yikes, yikes. So to start, Buddhism comes. Oh, now I'm the host. It says, okay, good, thank you. So Buddhism comes into China. Taoism is already there, and Taoism has already stood on upside down all the Confucian teachings, just turned them upside down in a playful kind of way, not in a mean way, just in a playful, enjoying way. And now Buddhism comes in, and Taoism does the same thing with Buddhism, only it amalgamates with Buddhism, and together they create Chan or Zen. So the creation of Zen in China is the amalgamation of Taoism that's already there and Buddhism that comes in from India. So the humor that's in Taoism and Zen, it breaks down categories: sacred and profane, sublime and ordinary, beauty and ugly, enlightenment and delusion. Upside down, collapses them. Because we get stuck on one side. We got stuck on wanting to be good. We got stuck on staying away from things that are ugly, and we get fixated. So the Taoist sages are always joking to help us break that fixation up. So here's kind of a long Taoist story that I don't think I've ever told before from Chuangzi. Ziyu was stricken with a grave illness. Ziji went to call on him. Amazing, said Ziyu. The maker of things is making me this twisted thing. My back is sticking up like a hunch. My organs are packed on top of my head. My chin is sunk in my navel. My shoulders are higher than my skull, and the knot on my head is pointing skyward. The yin and yang forces are totally off balance and awry, and yet my mind is unhurried. My mind is unhurried and calm. He crawled to the well. Looking in at his own reflection, he said, "My goodness, the maker of things is really making me something twisted and bent." And Ziji asked him, "Do you resent it?" Ziyu replied, "No, why should I resent it? If the maker of things should now transform my left arm into a rooster, I will use it to crow the dawn. If she should transform my right arm into a cross bolt, I will use it to shoot down a roasted owl. If she should transform my ass into a carriage wheel, then with my spirit as my horse, I will climb aboard and travel. Everything is continually changing within the way, within the Tao. To get the gift of life is a cause for joy. To encounter the loss of it is a cause for acceptance. When you are at ease with the moment and live peacefully through the process of change, then joy and sorrow cannot take over. The ancients called this untying the knots. The reason why the one who is not untied becomes fettered is the belief that things are truly tied down, but nothing has ever been tied down. That is the ultimate meaning of things. That's the long story. That's the only long story I'm going to read. So humor, which separates one thing from another, is not what Taoist and Zen humor is like. Humor which elevates one group over another, which is racic or racist or sexist or ethnic, that's not this full-bodied humor that just collapses all of the things we get stuck on. So there's a story of a Buddhist Taoist sage who is a meditator, and he lives up the mountain from the village. And when the full moon comes, the villagers put their children to bed at night and seal up the windows, because when the full moon comes and the teacher's done with his meditation, his laughter is so large as he looks at the moon and just enjoys nature, enjoys the luminosity, that he wakes up everybody in the village and they can't sleep. So this is a Taoist Zen sage. So, and that in Buddhism is juxtaposed against seriousness, which is important too. Buddha's mission, in a way, the historical Buddha who lived maybe 200 years before Chuang-Tzu, but they didn't have any contact with each other. His mission was to help people deal with their suffering due to old age, sickness, and death. And that set him on the path, a very serious path, which is solemn. And so in early Buddhism, because of Buddha, laughter became the expression of frivolity and sensitivity, and sensuality in his early life. Before he left the castle, before he left the palace. So laughter then, from an early Buddhist point of view, is superficial. It's evading and ignoring the different issues of life and death. And so Buddhism and Buddhist meditation is all about seriously meditating. The problem is that when we seriously meditate and aren't just feel connecting to the world, a religion begins to ignore the lower sensual regions and want to kick them out. When you think about Christianity, when you think about Muslim, when you think about even much of Buddhism, the stomach, the intestines, the sex organs, and the bladder, the earthly trinity of food, sex, and evacuation, we want to get beyond those. We want to transcend those. And that's the limitation that the Taoists are pointing out. And when the Vinaya comes into China, those are the rules of conduct and behavior that all the monks and nuns have to do in India. One of the rules in the Vinaya is that laughing out loud is an offense requiring confession and expiation in front of fellow monastics. And in the Pali Canon, which is the earliest Buddhist text, laughter, which shows your teeth, is childish, and a closed lip smile is much more appropriate. That's called shita in India. It's a faint smile. It's serene. It's subtle. And it's refined. And all practitioners aspire to this until Buddhism gets to China and encounters Taoism. Under the influence of the Taoists, strange things start happening. There's this guy who spends his full moon evenings just laughing after his meditation. And there's the Zen master Seppo. When people ask him questions, sometimes he'll respond, but often he just rolls wooden balls on the floor in his response. He has 3 wooden balls that he just rolls around and then laughs. And then we have Gute, one-fingered Zen. His one-fingered Zen, whenever people ask him about Zen, he lifts a finger. He lifts up a finger. And then we have, and Patrick, will you screen share now? Okay, now we've got 3 Taoist Zen. They're famous in China, at least they used to be pre-communist revolution. So the first one is Han Shan and Shite. Han Shan, who wrote Cold Mountain, he's a famous Taoist Chan teacher. He lived at the top of the mountain, and his buddy Shite, who lived in the monastery. So Han Shan would come down from the mountain, and Shite would leave the monastery and go outside the grounds, and they would play together. They would joke together. They would cavort together. And there they are, cavorting. And Han Shan is showing Shite his scripture. But what is his scripture? It has nothing on it. It's a blank page. And they're both just grinning from ear to ear. Because when the mind is still and we let go of the knot that we tie through our thinking, we feel some joy. We feel some joy. And actually, if we're in a situation where we laugh, that knot just evaporates on its own. And it just evaporates if we're doing laughter that's full belly. And then the second Zen teacher is the frog. Look at the big belly of the frog. So he's the Taoist Chan Zen teacher, and he's showing us that animals too have a place in the world, and they're Buddhas, and we can enjoy them, and laugh with them, and be with them, and enjoy their company. Then the third one are the 3 laughing monks. And here's something that's written about the 3 laughing monks. Sometimes they're called Taoist monks, sometimes they're called Zen monks. Here they are. They look like they're Zen monks, except for their bellies. And the monk is never supposed to show his or her belly. Their bellies are their haras, and that's in Tai Chi, in Qigong, in Zen sitting, our center of gravity lowers into our bellies. So our haras, when I became a Zen priest at first, my teacher gave me a haramaki, which I wrap around my hara to keep it warm. So that when I'm doing all that meditation, I can just let my thoughts just move down into my belly. So there they are, cavorting, and here's what it says about them, what the scholar says about them. The 3 laughing monks, they don't have any names because they never shared their names with anybody. They never answered anything, simply known as the 3 laughing monks. And they did only one thing. They would enter a village, stand in the marketplace, and start laughing. They would laugh with their whole being, and suddenly people would become aware. Then others would also get the infection, and a crowd would gather. the whole crowd would start laughing. Just because of them, what was happening? The whole town would get involved. Then they would move to another town. Laughter, laughter as the best medicine for us getting tied up in our minds. So, animals is Buddha, and then we have the putai in the Chinese restaurants. How many of you have seen the Buddha in the Chinese restaurants? He's always there. He's at the front of the restaurants, and we think he's a Buddha. But no, he's putai. He's putai, who is an incarnation of Maitreya Buddha, the Buddha of loving kindness. In China, he becomes putai, and through the Taoist influence, he's a vagabond. He wears ragged clothes, and he gathers oranges from people who will give them to him, and he carries a sack on his back, and he passes them out to poor people and kids. And so the Chinese restaurant Buddha that we see with a big belly, oh, we think he really enjoys his food. He might enjoy his food, but he's not Buddha. He's putai, and he's got his center of gravity is in his hara. His belly is full of air, and it could have some food in it too, but he knows how to release the knots within his head and just be here. And that's why he's always often laughing in the Chinese restaurants, but never just doing this, the limited smile. So then we have also in Japan, Ryokan, the great fool Zen master who liked to play hide and seek with kids and knew all the Taoist stuff and was really inspired by the Taoism. One night he was playing hide and seek and the kids didn't find him, and the farmer got into the barn the next morning and removed a bale of hay, and there's Ryokan still hiding. And the farmer poked him and he said, "The kids have all gone home, Ryokan. It's time for you to go home too." And Ryokan just laughed and went home. So, getting the point of a joke releases the tensions produced by these knots that we tie. And Chuang-Tzu Zen again says the ancients call this untying the knots. The reason why the one who is not untied becomes fettered is the belief that things are truly tied down. But nothing is ever tied down. Nothing is ever tied down. Nothing. And there's great freedom in that. What's happening in our country now is awful in many ways, but nothing is ever tied down. Nothing is ever tied down. So my good friend and my disciple Guy Gibbon, who's no longer alive and really was a Buddhist scholar, said all Zen is Buddhism with jokes, and I could say all Zen is Buddhism with Taoism. So, reversing the categories that we get stuck on, collapsing them. Now, the Indian Buddhists knew how to do this too, but not through play, not through laughter. They were very logical, Nagarjuna, very logical, deconstructing how we get caught in our categories. We get caught in naming things. And the Heart Sutra, singing the Heart Sutra, but not through laughter. So here's a Taoist Zen master who lay dying. This Zen master lay dying. His monks had all gathered around his bed, from the most senior to the most novice monks. The senior monk leaned over to ask the dying master if he had any final words of advice for his monks. The old master slowly opened his eyes and in a weak voice whispered, "Tell them truth is like a river." The senior monk passed this bit of wisdom and turned to the next monk next to him, and it circulated around the room. When the words reached the youngest monk, he asked, "What does he mean, truth is like a river?" The senior monk passed this bit of wisdom and turned to the monk next to him, and it circulated around the room. When the words reached the youngest monk, he asked, What does he mean, truth is like a river? The question was passed back around the room to the senior monk, who leaned over the bed and said, Master, what do you mean truth is like a river? Slowly the master opened his eyes and in a weak voice whispered, Okay, truth is not like a river. Do you get it? Do you get it? When you release all these names, all these categories, you really open up. You really begin to enjoy your life in the midst of suffering. Because we all suffer. We all suffer, some more than others. So there's a story about a Chinese Zen monk who wore a Buddhist robe, a Confucian hat, and Taoist sandals. So he's breaking out of the religious stereotypes and labels. He's confusing and confounding our fixed identities. My fixed identity as retired guiding teacher at Zen Center. Retired CEO, they don't want a retired CEO around in America. They want to get rid of him. But in Japan, the retired, since they really honor elders, the retired CEO, guiding teacher, gets to still be center. So what are they going to do with me at Zen Center in America? They haven't figured it out, but they'll let me do lots of fun stuff. So they don't need to figure it out. So in the West, we have some of this. We have William Chaucer, Shakespeare, stand-up comics, like early stand-up comics. I don't know, many of you are old enough. He's before my time. Charlie Chaplin, he wore a bowler hat. He had a dress coat, which was really oversized. He had a walking cane. He had pants that were so baggy. His shoes flopped, so he fell over. We've got Laurel and Hardy. We've got the Marx Brothers. We've got not so much in modern comedy. I don't know why. But those are great Zen adepts, great Taoist adepts. They're just pointing out to us that if we laugh, there was a book written once, Laughter is the Best Medicine. And that talked about all kinds of, I never read it, but I like sometimes the title's book is enough. So here's another one. Zen Taoist master Taiji lay dying. One of his disciples, recalling the fondness the Roshi had for a certain cake, went in search of some in the bake shops of Tokyo. After some time, he returned with a delicacy for the master, who smiled a feeble smile of appreciation and began nibbling at it. Later, as the master grew visibly weaker, his disciple asked if he had any departing words of wisdom or advice. Taiji said, Yes. As they drew closer, so as not to miss the faintest syllable, Taiji whispered, My, but this cake is delicious. With those words, he died. Those words, he died. And then we have my final example. Oh no, I have two more examples. From Japan, there's the Zen master Hakuin, who was like something like 18th century famous Rinzai Zen master. Again, steeped in Taoism, and when he was having his worst difficulty with his koans, he went and saw a Taoist sage on the top of the mountain, and the Taoist sage helped him do a sort of meditation that was kinder to himself. And anyway, when Hakuin got old, he used to like to draw his self-portrait and give it to his students and his friends. And in his self-portrait, he was bald, he was fat, he was cross-eyed, he was hunchbacked, and he was really old. You can find those self-portraits of Hakuin online. So this reminds me of a story that I've told at Zen Center a number of times, and also it's in one of my books. So when I was a young man and I lived at the monastery in California, the Zen monastery called Tassajara, I had a big opening in which all the names I was stuck on just collapsed, and I just enjoyed everything beyond the confines of Tim. Tim is just a bunch of words which are woven together and which have a narrator. The narrator is the words, but it's possible to see beyond those, to open up beyond those, and laughter helps us. Laughter helps us. Anyway, I had a big opening, a big experience, big opening. And my teacher said, the next day, I guess I must have gone to one-to-one. He said, "I'm proud of you." And then I went home. The retreat ended, and I went home and visited my mother. And when I came back, I think I talked about this at Zen Center a couple of weeks ago. When I came back, he said to me, "Your mother called me." And I thought, my mother? What's my mother doing calling him? I think I was 25 or something. My mother was quite irritated. And then when he looked and saw that I was irritated, and he said, "Oh, well, maybe she sees that her ugly duckling has turned into a swan." And I thought, "Oh, wow, I'm a swan. I'm a swan." And then he looked at me more closely and he said, or maybe she saw that her swan has turned into an ugly duckling." Here we get caught. "Oh, I'm a swan. I've got it." As soon as you think you got it, you don't have it. You don't have it. It's for the taking, but it's inner being. It's the wonderful inner being of all life. And if we think we get it, we don't. Like I was talking last time, pin down the butterfly. Don't pin down the butterfly. Put it in your butterfly collection. We're always doing that. Then we think, "Oh, I've got the butterfly soars." We can soar in our life even if we have a wing that's not working. We just soar in a different way. So we need conventions, we need nations, we need states, we need communities, we need families, we need lineage. And in Buddhism, lineage especially is really important. Who was whose teacher? All the way back, we have lineage papers. The Taoists do this too. And I think Chuang-Tzu and Lao Tzu wouldn't have been in doing this, but the Taoists do this. I have my lineage papers. Well, they're all true by convention, but they're all worthy of being laughed at, because as soon as we narrow things, we tie into knots. I have the way. I'm enlightened. Oh, I'm an ugly duckling. I got to be. No, you're not. You're a swan. Because if I'm thoroughly an ugly duckling, I'm a swan. Do you get that? It's only when I compare. Only when I compare. Before I compare. And laughter helps me let go of my comparison so I can just enjoy being with you and being with myself. My daughter tells me I have shrunk 2 inches. I said, "No, you're wrong." And then she measured me. I'm 82. And she said, "Yes, Dad, and pretty soon you're going to be as short as me." She's 5'2". Oh no! But oh yes, why not? We have different forms, different shapes. Why not? We don't have to get all wigged out about this stuff, you guys. Let's just enjoy our lives. So here's the story about EQ, the Zen master EQ, who also talked a lot about the Taoist sages. EQ was on a boat with a Shingon priest. The Shingon priest was bragging. EQ was a Zen teacher, and the Shingon priest was a Shingon teacher. 2 different sects of Buddhism. The Shingon priest said, with my magic powers, I can pray up the god of immovable perfection called Shudo before your very eyes, telling the other people on the boat, and make him stand right there on the prow of the boat. And with the beads of his rosary, Buddhists have rosaries too, the man began to invoke his presence, Fudo's presence. At this, all the passengers began to look back and forth, wondering what was going to happen. Then, just as he had said, there on the prow of the boat, the form of Fudo appeared, surrounded by a halo of dancing flames. Then the priest made a ferocious face and told them, you'd all better offer him a prayer. This made the other passengers very uneasy. All that is but EQ, who was completely unruffled. I don't know if this really happened. Probably not. Well, spat out the priest, how about you, Zen monk? How are you going to deal with my miracle? EQ said, by producing a miracle of my own. From my very body, I will cause water to issue forth and extinguish the flames of your Fudo. You'd better start up your prayers again. And EQ began to pee mightily all over the flames until at last the Yamabushi's magic was counteracted and the entire image melted away. Thereupon the passage on the boat all bowed to EQ for his wonderful display. So I've written 3 books, which some of you have seen. One of them is called Zen in the Age of Anxiety, Wisdom for Navigating Our Modern Lives. And as somebody came to me, had a one-to-one with me, and they said to me, all your book does is tell me over and over again to sit in meditation and accept, accept, accept. How does that help? Oh, my imperfect book. It's totally imperfect. Oh, no. Maybe I write a 3rd book, but that book is imperfect too. We always want to be in a different state of mind or situation. We always reject this moment because it's unpleasant. But this is the only moment we have to be really alive. Really alive. We don't need to cling to regret and disappointment about the future or the past. The future looks scary, but we don't need to cling to it. We can discover the natural flow of what Chuang-Tzu and Lao Tzu calls Wu Wei. Just being, just being. So healing begins with embracing our flaws, as Chuang-Tzu pointed out in that first story I read. And compassion begins with embracing the flaws of others. Here's what Lao Tzu says about this. Water is the softest thing, yet it can penetrate the hardest rock. This is the way of the Tao. This is the way of the Tao. So here's another Taoist Zen master who was asked by his followers, how can you be happy in a world of impermanence? The master held up a glass and said, someone gave me this glass, and I'm quite fond of it. It holds water and tea admirably and glistens in the sunlight. One day the wind may blow it off the shelf, or my elbow may knock it from the table. And I say, of course. When I understood that the glass is already broken, every moment with it is precious. We can do this. We can do this. Everything is broken because everything's in flux. So when Chuang-Tzu was dying, his disciples wanted to give him a lavish funeral. And here's what he said. I have heaven and earth for my outer and inner coffin, the sun and moon for my pair of jade discs, the stars for my pearls, the myriad creatures for my farewell presents. Is anything missing from my funeral paraphernalia? What will you add to those? They replied, Master, we're afraid that the crows and the kites will eat you. He replied, above ground, I'll be eaten by the crows and kites. But below ground, I'll be eaten by the ants and mole crickets. You rob the one of them to give to the other. How come you like them so much better? And he died smiling. He died. This is probably apocryphal, but it's pretty cool anyway. So 3 points from this story, which are obvious, challenging all these funeral traditions. Buddhists have very elaborate funeral traditions, as do Christians, as do Muslims, because when we're sad, we want as much as possible to stifle our feelings of deep grieving or deep missing. So we have all kinds of elaborate funeral traditions in Buddhism too. But he's rejecting the solemnity and negativity about death and saying it's just natural. It happens to everybody. And he's also undercutting his disciples' attempt to revere him. So I'm going to end with a story that I've told many times, but I think it's fitting. Um, uh, so when I was a young man in San Francisco, practicing Zen with my teacher, Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, my grandmother lived in San Francisco too, where she was born, actually. She was born there in about 1900, I think. No, 1898. Anyway, she was Catholic. She had been lapsed, and then she got back and went to the church and went back to the church. And she would take me to midnight mass with her occasionally. And when I was not living too far from her. I was living across the street from the Zen Center in San Francisco. And I told her about meditation, and she was very interested. And she said, "Dear, I would really like to learn how to do that, but I think maybe I'm too old." And she said, I use the rosary beads to try to be meditative, but my mind wanders all the time. She said, "But I'd like to meet your teacher. He is a priest, right, dear?" And I said, "Yes, he's a priest." And she said, "Oh, good. I'd like to meet him." So we had Suzuki, my wife and I had Suzuki over for dinner, and my grandmother. And Suzuki, my teacher, came in his black traveling robes. And we had a little black kitten in our living room. And as soon as our kitten saw Suzuki with his flapping robes, he got all excited. And he went over and started batting at Suzuki's robes. And Suzuki would pull him back and he would bat. And I've told this story so many times that now in my mind, Suzuki and the cat are rolling on the floor together, just batting at each other, which I do not think was the case. Anyway, Suzuki had a good time playing with the cat. And then, my grandmother and Suzuki and Linda and I had dinner, and they both went home. And afterward, the next day, my grandmother said, "Well, thank you, dear, for introducing me to your teacher. Now, you did say he was a priest, didn't you, dear?" And that's because she only knew Catholic priests who were very conventional, very, do things this way, and the other way. And she couldn't imagine this. She didn't say this to me, but I could tell. So I would say 6 months afterwards, she kept saying, "Oh, that was so much fun. I so much enjoyed being with your teacher, your meditation teacher. And you did say he was a priest." And I always said, "Yes, he was a priest. He was a priest, Grandma." But I don't think she ever believed me. So, because we get caught in a role, and then whether it's a religious role or a role of a function we have to fulfill in a family or in a job, and then we get confined in that role, constrained by that role, and forget that these roles are all made up. We need them for society to function, but they're all made up. And if we have a good laugh and really open up, we let go of it all. We just let go. It'll come back. It always comes back. But that's okay. Everything is tying and untying. Everything is forming and unforming. That's what life and death are all about. So I think that's what I want to say today. Let's see. Oh, yeah, I got about 15 minutes for any questions or comments from anybody.
There is one question in the chat, but Lawrence, you go ahead and then we can read that one.
Lawrence, you and Vincent Van Gogh.
Yeah.
Is Vincent there with you?
He's somewhere in cyberspace. Can you hear me?
It's a little muffled, but someone like Patrick or Lily can translate it if I can't hear you, because my hearing.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to leave this thing, maybe disappear for a second. This is an ancient Zen tale about an ancient Zen master, and it's called The School of No Respect.
Oh yeah, I know you're going to talk about. Go
Okay.
ahead.
The School of No Respect. I started practicing with the new Zen school, the School of No Respect. So I went to see the Roshi the other day. He told me I was greedy and hateful. So I said, I want a second opinion. He said, okay, you're ignorant too. That's special homage to Rodney Dangerfield, Roshi.
Raji Dangerfield, the great Zen master, the great Taoist sage. Yeah, thank you, Lawrence. Thank you. He's been dead a few years. Not all of you will know him, but I last saw him maybe 10 or 15 years ago.
So there was a question from Dave Capco about this Livia Cohen, an academic historian. She's been saying that Buddhists had to come to China twice. The first time they came, they had not mastered the Chinese language well enough. And the reason that Buddhists wanted to enter China was to gain property and be awarded money from the Chinese emperor. So he wondered if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, that's true. That's true. And it didn't last. It didn't last. So they had to retrench. They had to retrench and realize that they would need to pay attention to the Chinese mentality, the Chinese customs, the Chinese way of being. The Chinese were much more down to earth, and they valued the importance of work, manual labor. And so the when the Buddhists came in the second time, they had to get smart and pay attention to the Taoists and also pay attention to the Confucianists. But yeah, that's good. Yeah, I hadn't read that, but thank you.
I'll also add the second part of what I had put in, like the sort of AI's response on like the accuracy of that. So I'll just put in the second half of that, of what it's saying.
Oh, okay.
Which was basically that, it wasn't purely for economic reasons. It was also for true spiritual devotion. And the reason why it worked in China was because of the true spiritual benefits that Buddhism brought.
Sure, yes, and I don't want to diss Buddhism here. If I hadn't done hard meditation and disciplined myself for years, and I I wouldn't be I wouldn't be laughing all the time, but I learned how to crack through partly because of my discipline. But there's discipline in Taoism too. Think about the discipline that takes to do Tai Chi or Qigong day after day after day when you're making no progress. You feel like you're making no progress. That's discipline.
Hi, thanks for your talk, Tim.
Sure.
Yeah, you mentioned acceptance. There was a guy who went to a psychiatrist. He said, "Doctor, I have this problem. I can't remember things from one moment to the next. It's really a difficult issue with me." The doctor said, "Well, how long have you been having this problem?" And the guy said, "What problem?" That's an old story. But, isn't there something about non-duality in there and acceptance?
Yeah, of course. Of course, this is all about collapsing. We set up good and bad, up and down, right and wrong, and then we always want to be right. We want to be good. We want to move away from wrong. But those are cultural artifacts, and this is letting go of those artifacts. And people are afraid if they let go of those artifacts, they'll be mean. But actually, you'll be more loving because you're not you're not getting caught by your map. You're feeling connected to everyone and everything.
So I was wondering if you could speak to sort of what the role of a belief in something larger that's divine and loving and cares and understands what's best for us, like if there's a role for that, because I feel that to accept and to let go of control and to be like, okay, it's okay if my organs are on my head and this is going on and that's going on, because there's something larger that's good that's happening that I can
Yeah.
experience no matter what. Like, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, and of
It's hard
course,
to let go of control
yeah,
otherwise.
yeah, that's good. Thank you. And in Taoism, that larger thing, which is not a thing, is the Tao. The Tao, which includes all life. And we let go of getting caught by one side or another, we open up to it and it protects us. Remember, in Taoism, the Tao is called the Valley of the Universe. So if we let go of all the stuff that we're clutters our mind, we feel our connection to the Valley of the Universe, to the Great Mother who's supporting us, the Great Mother, and Prajnaparamita in Buddhism, the mother of all the Buddhas. And it's interesting that it's maternal, although these are all men doing this. Men have all the power, but they realize that it's the connectedness, it's the inner being of feminine energy that helps us when we let go of all of our dualistic thinking, all of our either or, today or tomorrow thinking. But as soon as we reify the mother, as soon as we turn her into something, she's not a thing. The great Tao, as Lao Tzu said, is ineffable, ineffable, great mystery. The Valley of the Universe is mysterious, and yet we are emanations of her. We're all emanations of her. So how could we not love each other? Because we're all emanations of the great Tao, the great mystery. How could we not?
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Sure. Sure. That's an important issue, important question. That's why we actually do. Let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. We do need some rules of behavior sometimes. We do. We all need rules of behavior. But let's not get all boxed up in them. My rule of behavior was, for years, I would get up for meditation every morning, regardless of how shitty I felt. That was a good rule of behavior. Good rule of behavior. Now I just lie in my bed, regardless of how shitty I feel. That's not a rule of behavior. It's just what I do.
I kind of have a follow-up question that's related to what you were just saying about a rule of behavior, because I've been really practicing it, no matter what, like just in the last day, basically, I've been practicing no matter what is happening, like not making this moment wrong and saying like this moment is like because I did the wrong thing, like things are going wrong, and so now this moment is wrong and it's less than what it would have been if I had done this. I'm trying to value each moment and be like, this moment is just what it should be, and I'm going to value it and be in it with all of my energy. But then what I wonder is, how do you, if you do have an intention of I have this intention to meditate, but this morning I didn't meditate, but I don't want to devalue and say I'm bad or this moment is bad because I didn't meditate. But then if I'm always making everything equal and saying, well, it's equally good even though I didn't meditate, how do I have an intention to meditate without making it wrong when I don't meditate?
Well, this is good, but of course you have an aspiration in your heart. You wouldn't have done this for, so devotedly for all the time you had if you didn't have you have an aspiration in your heart to let go of getting stuck on things, and that requires some discipline. That requires some discipline. So you screwed up on this moment, but on the next moment, I still aspire to be more connected to my spouse, maybe I was mean to my wife in the last moment. I'm supposed to be a Zen master. I shouldn't be mean to my wife, but sometimes I am. Sometimes I am. I'm human. But my aspiration is not to be mean to her. But in this moment, I realize I was mean, and then I aspire in the next moment to remember she's also an emanation of the Valley of the Universe. Even if she misbehaves, as all spouses do, she's still, I'm being facetious here, she's an emanation of the universe too. That's my aspiration in the next moment, is to feel that and to act that way.
Beautiful.
But I'm never going to get I'm never going to be perfect at it. Imperfection is opening. That's where we find our opening. That's where we find our connection, in imperfection. When we're perfect, we're closed. Open, imperfection. But we shouldn't try to be imperfect. We still have an aspiration. I want to be perfect. I want to be a perfect husband. Yes, I do. But that's a wonderful aspiration. But I'll be violating it in the next hour, probably. Who knows? Who knows?
Thank you. That was great. Jim, do you have a question?
Yeah, I recently, I forget where I read this, but I recently read the sentiment, the map is not the territory. And that's kind of what's cropping up for me in this conversation of we have rules for ourselves and those are kind of artifacts that we're imposing upon ourselves, but that's not really the territory of our lives. So that's just kind of the thought that cropped up listening to you and Tim have this
Yes,
conversation.
yes. Well, that's a very good metaphor. That's a very good metaphor. So let's think about, Lawrence likes to lead hikes. Let's say Lawrence is leading a hike. Tim's too old to lead hikes. Tim just slithers along. I don't mean that Tim, I mean this Tim. Lawrence is just a kid. He leads hikes. Let's say he's got his map. He leads hikes in Arizona. And let's say he's got his map. He's never led this hike before. So he's just focused on the map the whole time. And trying to get people are behind him. They're depending on him being focused on the map. But he's so focused on the map that he doesn't notice the beautiful waterfalls that are passing. He doesn't, and then he stumbles on the rock in front of him and falls down. He needs the map. But if we get glued to the map, we don't feel the connectedness to the trees, to the water, to the sky, to the earth. So the map is wonderful, but if we get glued to it, we don't notice the expansiveness of the territory, of the great valley of the universe. So thank you, Jim. Thank you for bringing that in. But we do that. We all do that sometimes, It's part of being human. We can laugh at ourselves and move on, aspire to do better and move on.
Thank you so much. That was
We
great.
don't use them in the lakes. I'm just saying we don't use them. I tell people to turn off their flashlights and just to try to be and
Yeah,
turn off their phones too. Avoid the technology.
really. Everybody wants to take their phones on their hikes now. Jeez. Give me a break. They're up at 12,000 feet. They got their phones. Oh, what would the Taoist sages think? I think we've got
Not
a
approved.
little cuckoo, I think.
Try to be aware of the moon guys also from the hike on the full moon.
Yeah.
I really enjoy the Sanctuary of the Tao and what you're talking about. One thing I just wanted to share is I had a number of things go haywire, which is, the chaos hits. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can't see you, but I can hear you. I don't need to see you. Your voice is very clear.
Oh, okay, good. So anyway, long story short, with all these calamities happening, I got clobbered at once, even an engine of a car blowing up on my Prius, and it was over the top. And then having some altercations going on, I found myself getting triggered. And instead of being in bliss, I went quite the opposite. And now I'm trying to really, not trying, but applying myself to remember to do the breathing, the 4 seconds in, hold for 4 and breathing out for 6, calming everything down, and then repeating something like acknowledging that I am challenged, that I am learning, and I am wiser. But I
Good.
find myself getting hijacked once in a while when too many things at one time clobber me. So, any comments on that? I am still in the
Well,
process of
of course, that happens to all of us, but the Taoist sages emphasize simplifying, simplifying, simplifying. My Zen teacher emphasized simplifying, simplifying, simplifying. But we can only simplify so much, if you have to support yourself, you're in a relationship with someone, your roof is leaking, you've got among all your electronic devices. But if you can find a way to simplify, it will really help. Does that make sense?
Of course.
Well, what about when you
Simple
have
is
like a lot of
complicated.
triggers at one time?
Pardon?
What about like just when you have a lot of unmet needs and triggers at one time?
Well, then you just notice those. You breathe through them, just like you've said. You recognize them, multiple triggers, and then if you can laugh about them, you laugh about them. If you can't, you cry about them. Crying and laughter go together. So, because crying also releases. Crying also opens us up. So the great sages, crying and laughter, they saw as a release for both. And then you notice what the triggers are, and if they're multiple, you probably can't handle them. But if they're just singular, you can notice it and make a course adjustment. But sometimes we can't make a course adjustment. All we can do is go.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to mute myself again.
All right.
Thank you.
This is an old Zen. I don't know.
Yeah, life. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I think we'll wrap up here. I'll just sort of close with thanking Tim so much for speaking to us today. That was a wonderful talk, and thank you for answering our questions and having this discussion. Thank you everybody for your questions. It was so wonderful. Thank you all for being here. And I just want to do a reminder that Tim is available for mentorship, the way that he mentors people through the Zen Center. He can also do that through Sanctuary DAO. I mean, it's just, I don't know how we consider that, whether it's through the Zen Center, through Tim, through us, doesn't really matter, but you can, that's available for you if you're interested in mentorship with him. Tim is my mentor. And to watch, I wanted to share like how you can watch the series if you've missed the ones from the Zen Center. So they're all on YouTube, and I attached them in this email. Next week, there's going to be in the email for this class, and next week you can go to the Zen Center website, and there's a link right on the first page when you get to the Minnesota Zen Center if you want to join that talk next Sunday morning.
And that talk's going to be, I'm going to say just a little bit about humor, and then I'm going to try to be practical and think, well, how do we bring more humor, and what actually should we do internally to bring more humor in our lives? And these are not humorful times if you pay attention to anything. Maybe you just don't pay attention to media at all, which we need. These are not generally humorful times. But we can find it. The Tang Dynasty things were bad. Oh, I won't get into that anyway. Things have always been bad. People have been always treating each other poorly, but we don't have to treat each other poorly. We just don't have to.
Beautiful. Yeah. And then lastly, I want to say that we're going to be starting up with Stuart's, listening to Stuart's recordings and having discussions about that starting next year in January. And we're going to continue to have Tim speaking with us once a month on the first Sunday of the month, like we have been. And he's going to continue this series for longer. He's initially started with 6 parts, but we're going to continue for a while. So that's all I had to say. Thank you, everybody. So good to see you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.